Okay, welcome to part 4 of the American Evolution, a new form of government. Now we're going to start talking about the United States Constitution. One of the things that I often ask my classes is the Constitution important? Now, almost unanimously, I get an answer of yes, yes it is. I'll then follow that up with another question. I'll say, okay, fine, it's important. What does it do? And you'll be amazed how many times students have no clue how to answer that question. They really don't know what the document does. They know it's important, but they don't know what it does. Well, they're actually in pretty good company. In a survey that was conducted in 1987 on the bicentennial of the Constitution, it found that 46% of Americans did not know the original purpose of the Constitution. 46%. 26% thought it was to declare independence from England, which is kind of ironic because we have a document for that, and it's actually called the Declaration of Independence. 59% did not know what the Bill of Rights is. 41% correctly identify them as the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. But 27% thought it was the Preamble to the Constitution. And my personal favorite is this one. 49%, almost half, erroneously thought that the president could suspend the Constitution with an executive order. So, if you don't know a lot about the Constitution, you're in pretty good company. So, in May of 1787, 55 men from 12 of the 13 states will convene to begin to develop a new Constitution, right? Rhode Island's not going to show up. They kind of see this exactly for what it is. They see if they show up there, they are going to lose some power, and so they refuse to send a delegation. The other states realize that, well, if we come up with a new document, Rhode Island does not want to go it alone. They'll toe the line. So you have 55 men from 12 different states in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, beginning in May, continuing through September, in a room that has no air conditioning. The windows are sealed for security reasons, so you got 55 sweaty, smelly guys deciding what your government's going to look like. Who are these founding fathers? Well, these men are nationalists, very strongly nationalistic, right? They are men of consequence, right? They're important members of their community. Also, they are experienced in business and in politics. They are well educated. And they're mostly young, with the exception of Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. These are young men. For example, James Madison and Gouverneur Morris, they're 35 years old at the time. Rufus King, Alexander Hamilton, they're both 32. Right? Charles Pinckney is the youngest delegate. He is 29. Right? These are young men. And finally, and very importantly, these men are not extremists. Right? They are not extremists. Okay? People like Samuel Adams, not there, not invited. Thomas Jefferson, not invited. Patrick Henry, not invited. These men are not wanted there. Right? The more nationalist members of our founding fathers are the men that will be there. Right? Their goal was twofold. First, create a better balance between liberty and security, right? More security, and yes, you have to trade off some liberty for that, right? There's too much liberty, there's no security. Second was to create a stronger central government. These are the two things. The one thing that they were not doing was they were not trying to create a democratic government. They're trying to create a representative republic, right? John Adams referred to democracy as mob rule. Remember, they were worried about tyranny from above. We see that in the Articles of Confederation, but there was also a fear of tyranny from below, like Shays' Rebellion. So they didn't want democracy. They didn't want what they would call mob rule. In fact, you can actually see this fear in the preamble itself. This is a statement that a lot of people are probably very familiar with, but if you really read this, you can see the fear of tyranny from below. It says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America." If you really pay attention there, you probably just picked up on the fear, right? ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. That is reflections of Shays' rebellion right there in the preamble, right? From the very onset, they were worried of that tyranny from below. So let's take a look at what was proposed here. First, we have the plan that was proposed by the larger states. We refer to it as the Virginia plan. It was put forth by the Virginia delegation led by James Madison. What it's going to call for is a new form of legislature, a bicameral legislature. Instead of one house, we're going to have two houses. Again, serve as that checks and balance within itself, right? Kind of like what John Adams had suggested with his thoughts on government, right? Both houses will be represented proportionally by the population. The larger your population, the more delegates you get to that body of the legislature, both bodies of the legislature. It's going to call for a chief executive to be chosen by the legislature. So you'll have a president, but it'll be picked by the legislative branch. You'll have a judiciary, independent, but its members also chosen by the legislature. Now, of course, the Virginian plan and the large state plan said that this was going to create a stronger central federal government. But it's not necessarily appreciated by the smaller states. But they have a plan of their own. The smaller states will come up with a plan called the New Jersey Plan. Again, it was because it was introduced by the New Jersey delegation, this one led by William Patterson, right? The New Jersey Plan is going to call for basically a reshaping of the Articles of Confederation. They're going to say the Articles of Confederation are close. We need to stick close to it, but we just need to modify a few things, right? Now, it is still going to be a brand new document because they know that in order to just amend the Articles of Confederation, they would have to get all 13 states involved, and Rhode Island isn't even there. So a reshaping of the Articles of Confederation. So you have a unicameral legislature, a single house with equal state representation. One state, one vote, same kind of format that they have before, right? It's restructured, but still weighted very heavily for the states. But there is this one caveat. It will have introduced to it the recognition of the supremacy of federal law, that federal law is the law of the land, which means that all states must abide by federal legislation. You can't just ignore it. Now, obviously, these two plans can't work together, right? There's going to be a series of compromises that are going to have to be achieved in order for this to create a final document. Matter of fact, the Constitution itself is based on a whole series of different compromises, right? Ultimately, what they can all agree on is that you have to have separation of powers. Now, some of this you probably are already familiar with, a horizontal separation of powers, right? For example, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary branch, they all need to be separated. Each one serves to check and balance the other. But there's not only a horizontal separation of power that needs to be established, but there's going to be a vertical separation of powers that needs to be established itself. A separation between the federal government and the state governments, right? The judiciary branch actually is going to serve as part of the process of that checks and balances between the federal level and the state level. What we ended up with was a final document that is a balance of three things. A balance of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. And if I was to put it in order of how much is weighted the most, I would say it's mostly aristocratic, followed by monarchist, and finally there is a touch of democracy in it. We'll break out the first of these, the executive branch, in the next lecture.